Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Mr. B. Pardon me for laughing, but this is not what I thought would be happening. I have breaking news for you. Apparently, the Virginia redistricting vote has been blocked by a circuit court. I believe it's a district or a circuit court in Virginia, the Tazewell Circuit Court. Apparently, they didn't follow the process that the state constitution lays out to be followed. So the Republican Party filed an injunction or some sort of lawsuit against the state and the governor and the election people. And unfortunately for the Democrats, they lost the case. I am tuning into a gentleman who is a part of, it's Robert Gourvier. He's an attorney. And he is reporting on this particular news. So let's go ahead and jump in and see what he had to say about the matter.
Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. We've got some big breaking news. We are talking about the Virginia election. The Democrats' scam to redistrict their entire state to strip many seats away from the Republican Party has now been blocked. We'll jump right into that and see what the latest is from the judge. He issued the order today. It is going to be making reverberations all throughout Virginia. They're already saying that they're going to appeal it, but the clock is ticking on this thing. And so for now, we are blocked out. The redistricting election, dead at the moment. We'll see where it goes from here. Tons of reaction, lots of news, all of it breaking at the moment. So we'll dive into that. Then we'll take a look at what happened with Act Blue, because they were hauled into Congress to answer questions about their potential criminality. We've been covering this case for a while and have seen that they really don't want to answer any questions about what they've done in terms of accepting foreign donations and foreign cash that they just shove right back into American elections. Then we'll get back up to speed on the Southern Poverty Law Center, which was criminally indicted last night, and we'll see exactly what is inside that indictment. So tons to get to. Very glad that you're here and with us. As you can see, we are in a new location on a little family vacation. Thanks for joining us on the road. But we've got some big news. And so without any further ado, just want to confirm we're coming across loud and clear from this new location and that you can see and hear us okay. I think we are, hopefully it's looking good. And I think it is. That's tremendous news. That means we can just get right to it. Without any further ado, that's the wrong tab right here. Big win out of Virginia, coming after the election to redistrict the entire state to strip Republicans of their deserved Republican seats to make them Democratic. In the big fight over gerrymandering, which of course the Democrats are unleashing in a very 50-50 state to seize additional power that they are not entitled to. Now, the election just occurred, and we saw what the vote was, extremely close, courtesy of Decision Desk HQ. We had the yes vote coming in at 50.09, the no vote coming in at 49.91. And what is so egregious about this, obviously, as you can see right here on the map, most of the state of Virginia is red. And what they've done now is gerrymandered it to death to make it look something like this. So to go from a split where we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 red seats over into one red seat, taking 5 seats, flipping them all blue, carving up the very populated areas that are filled with the blue libs, and then encompassing the red areas, creating for themselves 5 additional seats. So this was shocking. It was so close. A lot of people had questions about the mail-in votes and about the actual integrity of the election. But that is all for naught at the current moment, because we had a big judge who just came down today and enjoined the certification of the special election. So the election, as it is supposed to go forward, you have these various processes where you hold the election, then you certify the election, then you make the changes after the certification. You can start to deploy and change the rules and start to, fetch new candidates and so on and so forth, has now been stopped. All breaking today, this afternoon. And it came out of Tazewell Circuit Court. The judge reaffirmed all of the prior rulings. We'll take a look at the order that came down, declared the entire referendum unconstitutional, saying that the amendment process for HB 1384 was completely unconstitutional. They were not allowed to do this. He entered injunctive relief, and he specifically enjoined the certification of the election. Amazing. He denied a motion to stay all of this pending the appeal, and a final order will be entered once it's drafted. And so there was a hearing, it sounds like today, and this guy, Ren Williams, was over there. He's an attorney who is also a delegate running for the Virginia 47th House District. And so shout out to Ren Williams for bringing us this report. But we also saw Just the News was confirming this, saying, according to sources, Virginia judge stays the certification of the redistricting vote today, barring the certification. And that's according to Ken Cuccinelli as well as Rep. Ren Williams. So a couple other people confirming this, and I do have the final order that we'll take a look at in just a moment. The Tazewell County Circuit Court issued an injunction barring the certification of the election. The order will face certain appeal. They're already saying that they will. Jay Jones is the attorney general, saying we're going to take this puppy up and likely head to the state Supreme Court, which is already to express a challenge or address a challenge to this entire referendum. And multiple wins. Virginia voters, as we know, on Wednesday narrowly approved a redistricting referendum that would allow the state legislature to redraw its congressional maps in a manner that, of course, is going to favor the Democrats. The state Supreme Court is expected to take up a challenge on this later this month. In Virginia, the Supreme Court in Virginia, not the United States Supreme Court, declined to block the referendum outright, saying it is the process, not the outcome of this effort, that we may ultimately have to address. Issuing an injunction to keep Virginia from the polls is not the proper way to make this decision. So they said that the vote can continue on, and they'll look at the process once the vote is over, but at least we have the vote, they're thinking, and then we can hash out the mechanism of the referendum itself. Now, the other report is coming from Ken Cuccinelli, and there's a lot of problems with how they did this. And just take a look at, if you were in Virginia, you saw this yesterday, but this is what they wrote for the proposed constitutional amendment. The whole thing was insane. And he says, Ken, that this is also a violation of Virginia Code 24.2-684, which is called the plain English rule, saying it's obviously incredibly biased. We'll read this here in a second. The only requirement of the rule is that the wording be in plain English. Okay, there's no fairness requirement. So this is probably not going to be a central part of this resolution. But there are probably going to be other areas that we'll dig into, and we'll read the order from the judge here coming up. But here's what they wrote here. Okay, here's a question. Should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts in the maps that we just saw to restore fairness in upcoming elections? You love fairness, don't you, Virginia? How could you vote against something for unfairness while ensuring that Virginia's standard redistricting process resumes for all future redistricting after the 2030 census? And of course, once they get power, they never reverse it. It never goes back the other way. So here is what the order looks like, courtesy of Tyler Englander. He is a Virginia State Capitol reporter over at 8 News, and we appreciate him posting this. So this is the final order, and this is the one that came down from the Honorable Jack Hurley, judge of the Tazewell County Circuit Court. So the hearing happened today. You can see the order also dropped today, entered this 22nd day of April. And so he got this out pretty quickly, but we don't have a lot of details, a further memorandum about how he came to this conclusion. He may draft that for us later. But here's what he wrote. And this has been going on for quite some time, by the way. This is the RNC, and I think we've covered this here before. RNC was suing long time ago to invalidate this. It's already gone up to the Supreme Court in Virginia. They kicked it back down and said, well, you can't do anything until after the election is over. He said, perfect. The election's over. Now we're going to take a look at the process and how bad this was. He said, all right, here's my final judgment coming out of Tazewell. Says, having considered the RNC's motion for final judgment and the record in this case that has been brewing for a while, we now grant final judgment in plaintiff's favor on all counts of their verified complaint. saying we also declare that the HJR 6007 is void ab initio because it violated the House Joint Resolution 428 and House Joint Resolution 601, and any action taken thereon is an invalid expansion of the General Assembly's call to the governor for a special session. So the special session was premised on something that was out of alignment with the other House joint resolutions that give them the power to do that. They also declare that HJR 6007, which is presumably calling for the special session, is void ab initio because it violated the Virginia Constitution. Wow, unconstitutional from the get-go, not a surprise. As there has not, according to the rules, been an ensuing general election of the House of Delegates, and you can only call for these things at a predetermined interval. And such ensuing general election cannot occur until 2027. So they jumped the gun on this thing. We also declare that because Virginia Code Section 30-13 has not been complied with, the votes on the proposed constitutional amendment taken during the 2026 regular session are ineffective as being a second vote of the General Assembly under the Constitution. So they're trying to get more power and do more things than the Constitution allows them to do, which is pretty typical for this party. They also declare that as a result of those things, so these House resolutions, House joint resolutions are invalid. They violate the Constitution. Other rules in the Virginia Code also passed by the legislature have not been complied with. You have to follow a certain procedure, just like the Supreme Court of Virginia was saying, you have to follow the procedure. As a result, we now declare that HB 1384 violates the submission clause of the Virginia Constitution because the ballot language proposed in 1384 submits to the voters a flagrantly misleading question to the voters that we just read. And because the ballot language did not accurately describe the proposed amendment as it was even passed by the General Assembly. You want to vote for fairness? Do you want to vote for decency? Do you want to vote for being a good person? Or do you want to be an anti-democratic fascist? Why didn't they just write that in there? We also declare that HB 1384 violates the timing clause of the Virginia Constitution because it submitted the proposed amendment to the voters for early voting on March 6, 2026, which is sooner than the required 90 days after passage of HJ4 by the General Assembly. So once again, the timing is bad. We also declare that HB 1384, the redistricting, violates the form of laws clause of the Virginia Constitution, another section, both because it embraces more than one object and because its title does not accurately describe its subject matter. So they're just, again, voting for decency and fairness. Declares also the court that this redistricting act violates another provision of the Constitution. And this is great. It's just like rapid fire, just like machine gun blast of all these unconstitutional orders or violations, because it requires mandatory satellite offices in a precise way. And that requirement is withdrawn from the powers of the General Assembly in that the legislative body is prohibited to enact local, special, or private laws for the designation of places of voting. So the new law then changes how the elections are going to be conducted. Okay, General Assembly has these powers to do certain things for elections. The new law strips that away, but that new law is in conflict with other parts of the Constitution. And we also declare that any and all votes for or against the proposed constitutional amendment, in the April 21, 2026 special election are hereby ineffective, Abigail CIA Spanberger. And so accordingly, the court finds that all plaintiffs have standing to obtain declaratory and permanent injunctive relief. So the RNC can be here. They're allowed to file this complaint. They've done that. And we also find that the equities weigh in favor of permanent injunctive relief, that the plaintiffs have no adequate remedy at all. The Republicans, the RNC, nothing else they can do. So we have to stop the certification from going forward. And that the RNC and the Republicans will be irreparably harmed absent permanent relief because of the numerous violations of the constitutional amendment process and because the Congress people who are a part of the complaint, not just the RNC, but other people who are actually running for election, Congressman Klein and Griffith would also be irreparably harmed by their districts changing at this juncture. And this is very important because we are in the middle of election season. And we've got primaries coming up. We've got the general election in November. And we have this very important concept called the Purcell principle, that if you start changing things too close to an election, you can't do that. Ultimately, the courts have said that. This is a violation of the Purcell principle because it's too close and it causes voter confusion and it disadvantages the people who are not ready for the changes because they're operating according to the old rules. It's like you're in the middle of a sports game and you're just like, well, now we're going to count this as a goal. Like, well, you just scored all those goals. Illegal. So he continues. He says, having found that the RNC and these Congress people are entitled to permanent injunctive relief, the court permanently enjoins the libs, the defense, and their successors from certifying the results. You cannot continue to move forward with the enactment of the results of this election. The court also permanently enjoins the defendants and their successors from taking any action to give effect to the proposed constitutional amendment that is the subject of the special election that occurred yesterday, including but not limited to, don't touch a thing, Abigail. You cannot update or alter voter registration records in accordance with new congressional districts under the proposed amendment. So the changes that you wanted, not happening. You cannot update or alter any election districts, any precincts, any polling places in accordance with the new districts under the proposed constitutional amendment. Don't even think about updating or generating poll books or ballots. Don't even get your printer to print out the new ballots in accordance with the new districts under the proposed amendment. And do not proceed with new maps or districts in any congressional primary or general election under the proposed constitutional amendment. You're stopped from everything. We also deny the defendant's motion to dismiss the complaint. We also overrule the defendant's plea of immunity and demur to their verified complaint, saying you can't sue us for something like this. We also find that the RNC and the Republican candidates have complied with the county defendant's motion craving oyer, and thus dismisses the motion and orders that the documents provided in response to the motion are made a part of their verified complaint. We also deny the county defendants, and so the county also came in on this, request for relief against the Commonwealth without prejudice. So they were asking for other things. We deny any other outstanding motions. We overrule any other outstanding pleas. We suspend any bond requirement for any party petitioning or appealing from this final judgment. And big one, we deny the defense, the leftists, their motion to stay pending appeal. So this order goes into effect. We're not going to pause this and then allow them to continue to redraw the maps and to print new ballots and to start updating people's registration. Oh, you were in precinct 5. Now you're in precinct 7. And start to gerrymander this election into oblivion. All entered into the record, courtesy of the Honorable Jack Hurley, an American hero, for forcing them to follow the rules. They're cheaters. They try to throw people off ballots when they don't like them, like they did for Trump, or they try to throw them in jail, like they did for Trump, or they try to go after the alternate electors and call them criminals, or they try to take foreign money, like Act Blue did. It's nonstop. Spy on their political opponents and then rig the rules and then cram through a fake rigged election. So absolutely blown out. And shout out to Ken Cuccinelli and others who have been flagging this all day today. Jonathan Turley also came out. He said, we are having quite the night in the courts. That's right. A Virginia judge just blocked the state from certifying the results of Tuesday's congressional map referendum as unlawful. Guy's name is Judge Jack Hurley Jr. He ruled that Democrats did not follow the correct procedure for a constitutional amendment because they were racing this through. They were saying, oh, Texas started all this, right? Even though you look at all the blue states, how many blue states exist where Republicans have virtually no representation at all? You can look at Massachusetts and many others where they're 45% of the vote. They have 1 or 2 seats. The blue states are gerrymandered to hell. And when Texas starts to reinvestigate their map, then all of a sudden they say, oh, you want to play? Let's play. And then they, like crack addicts, they redistrict the entire state to strip. Again, this is insane if you look at the numbers, it's 49.9%. All of this red, you would get one district. Nearly 50% of the vote is against it. Too damn bad. You're going to lose all of your congressional representation. No representation at all in Congress because they want more Californias, more one-party states. And once they get this through, or according to their mindset, there's no going back on it. And so Jay Jones, the Attorney General, he said, we're going to appeal this whole thing. Says, my office will immediately file an appeal in the Court of Appeals. As I said last night, Virginia voters have spoken, and an activist judge, it's amazing. Now they're the ones screaming about activist judges. No court of law, you jerks, have found that your election was lawful. How about that? You want to play that game? We're very familiar with that one. Saying, we look forward, and they should not have veto power over the people's vote. We look forward to defending the outcome of last night's election, and that is courtesy of Jay Jones. And was he the guy who was threatening people with his text messages, like, I wish her brains were smashed in or whatever? Here's a little bit more from the original underlying lawsuit. So you remember, this is what we talked about. It's a 48-pager, so I'll just show you the highlights of this thing, but this is what they were ultimately successful on. So this was filed some time ago by the RNC, Ben Klein. We also had various other Congress people, Morgan Griffith versus Steve Koski and the rest of the entire state. All of the registrars, the vice chairman, the electoral board of all the various counties, all sued. Don't you even think about changing the map. And they gave us some more background here. They said, when the Virginia and the people ratified the Constitution, we had a very clear amendment process. We can't just have you guys just rig it. Saying only the General Assembly can propose a constitutional amendment, and only the voters can approve or reject it. And the voters have a say on both the front end and the back end. Only after majorities in both houses vote in favor of an amendment twice with an intervening election in between. Okay, so you vote on it once, you have an election, then you vote on it again. Only then can they submit the amendment to the voters. And they never did that. They just did one vote and like, it's good enough, shove it on there. And they'll try to ram it through, saying the amendatory process has withstood the test of time, yet the General Assembly's rush to ram through an amendment threatens to ruin it. This court has already held. Through HJR 6007, the General Assembly proposed a constitutional amendment to allow for a mid-decade partisan redistricting in violation of the careful constitution-making process that we've already established. This is a blatant abuse of power. It's trampling on the procedural rights of the minority of the General Assembly. They passed the rules. So this cannot count. HJR 607. That's not number one. And then you come back and say, well, we'll just, have another vote on it. This was passed after hundreds of thousands of Virginians had already voted in 2025. And this did not comply with the notice requirements. This is void ab initio, and that cannot be substituted or submitted to voters. But nevertheless, what did the Democrats do? They still are proceeding as if it's valid. They have ordered the defendants, everybody listed there, all the county recorders, all of the election officials, to, quote, conduct an election for the purpose of taking sense of qualified voters of Virginia. They've ordered them to answer this following question. Are you a decent person or are you a fascist? Vote yes if you're a good person. Vote no if you hate America and you're a fascist. Early voting is set to begin. This occurred back on March 6th. And even if this were beginning at the appropriate time, these are unconstitutional, and they're not starting at the appropriate time. Because the election must be scheduled not sooner than 90 days after passage, the earliest that voting could have started on this was April 16th, and they didn't do that. Early voting started back on March 6th, and they banked a lot of votes, actually, by the way, during that interim. Tons of the blue votes came in on the, what, of course, we know it, early ballots. Even if the special election were beginning at the appropriate time, these actions are unconstitutional. No election can be held based on the proposed constitutional amendment. This is void ab initio. And even if it did contain a valid proposed constitutional amendment, the ballot question does not submit the amendment to voters. It presents an entirely different question than the joint resolution. It fails to inform the voters that the proposed revision results in the loss or the restriction of an independent fundamental right. You have to do that. It does not tell Virginia voters that the amendment that they are considering strips them of their constitutional right. The ballot question asserts a misleading statement, if not an obvious falsehood. The whole thing's fake. Restore fairness. Are you a bigot? Which one? If anything, it destroys fairness. It strips half the state of their votes. It is the product of unfairness, and the whole point of it is to increase unfairness. It does not restore fairness to allow for the creation of districts that unduly favors the Democrats. Fairness and democracy and, justice, these are words that they have completely perverted. You hear them say democracy. It means democratic dictatorship. They want more states to have all branches of government in perpetuity, just like California and many other West Coast states. It doesn't restore fairness to replace a nonpartisan redistricting process through an independent commission with a partisan one through a body that is made up of only one party. It doesn't restore fairness to submit a proposed amendment to the Virginia voters that is a blatant abuse of power. And if submitted to the Virginia voters, a citizen could vote in favor of the amendment thinking that they were protecting their constitutional rights when in fact they're doing the exact opposite. HB 1384, the bill that provides for the upcoming election, also violates Article 12 of the Constitution. It purports to, quote, submit the amendment to the people less than 90 days after it cleared the legislature for the second time. The Constitution requires at minimum 90 days. Yet under this, voting on the amendment will begin on March 6th. That's less than 2 months after the mid-January passage. And finally, HB 1384 violates the Constitution because it combines multiple objects into a single piece of legislation. In addition to providing for the upcoming election, the bill purports to change the rules for venue in constitutional cases and to abolish a notice provision because it unconstitutionally embraces more than one object. Again, null and void. And the judge, in his order that we just read, basically was like, yep, you win, win. Checking the boxes on all these. Emergency relief is needed to ensure that voting on this at least occurs no earlier than 90 days. Emergency relief is needed to prevent the transmission of a defective proposal that violates the Constitution. And so we'll hit the highlights on the rest of this, but parties, of course, RNC, they work to elect Republicans. We've got other candidates. The NRCC was in here. And if you don't stop this from being enacted, it's going to harm all of these individuals, all of these entities. Same for Ben Klein. He's a congressperson in the 6th district. If this gets passed, he's gone. Morgan Griffith, if this gets passed, he's gone. So they've all got appropriate standing. Now, all of the defendants are the Virginia Department of Elections, many Board of Election people here, all listed here in Virginia, all the big names. The court has jurisdiction. We're in the right location. So the judge in Tazewell can actually do all of this. Now, the commission was already in existence. They redistrict every 10 years, but that wasn't good enough for them. And so in 2022, 50% of the Virginia voters voted Democrat, 47 voted Republican. It's a 50-50 state. 2024 was almost the same. And so what they did is commandeer this. After they got power, they commandeered a special legislative session to ram through a redistricting amendment, even after the 2025 election had already begun. They got super majorities in both chambers of the General Assembly, and they went right to the governor for a special session. In its application, the General Assembly said, that the special session would consider only such matters for the special session. It convened, they passed a procedural resolution, nearly unanimous margins. And a year and a half after they convened this, many months after the other session, they then sought to circumvent these limits. So they passed some rules, and then they went around their own rules. House of Delegates, again, came back 2025 to propose another constitutional amendment to strip the redistricting committee of its constitutional authority. In a letter to legislators, Speaker Scott purported to call the Virginia House of Delegates into a special session. But the House of Delegates did not consider a budget bill. They didn't follow the standard session. On October 27th, the Speaker and the Democrats introduced Joint Resolution 6006 to expand the scope. Then they introduced this HJR to modify the congressional districts. It would divest the redistricting committee Then the new General Assembly convened, all the technical details. This new amendment would redraw everything. It would flip it from 6 seats and 5 seats to 10 seats for Democrats, only 1 seat for Republican. And they wanted to make this a partisan victory. The map gives Virginia the most aggressive gerrymander of any other state in the country. 46% of Virginians who voted for this will get just 9% of the seats. They have no qualms about this, right? They play like crackheads. You all started it and we effing finished it, said some lunatic called Democrat Senate President Lucas. The map was proposed to flip it 10-1, and the whole thing is illegal. It appropriates a bunch of money that they can't appropriate, mandates a bunch of things that they can't mandate in various sections. And if you don't stop this, it is going to wreck the state in many different ways. So there are various claims that basically the judge said you win on all of them. They say, we want you to say this violates the intervening election clause. Got to have one general election before the others. They didn't do that. And count 2 was this violates the submission clause. They won on that one. It continues on, saying the congressional districts in the upcoming elections is also misleading. The ballot says it would restore fairness, but it definitely did not. This ballot question violates the submission clause. It fails to inform the voters that they're going to lose an independent state right, which is to have a representative in Congress. Bunch of Supreme Court precedent and all of it being submitted. Timing violates the Constitution, as we saw the judge explain. There's a special 45-day limitation. It requires early voting for 45 days before. And they started voting before the 90 days had expired. Count 4 violates the form of laws clause under the Constitution and embraces multiple objects. Many other subjects are in there. It should be one subject, not a bunch of subjects. Here you see they list them out. The second object is submitting the amendment. The third object is the repeal of this. The fourth object is a venue transfer. And so you can't do that. You can't just cram in a bunch of stuff all in together and then shove it into one amendment. So there needs to be an injunction. And as we fast forward through some of this to count 6, saying you can't allow this to happen in court. And so ultimately they asked the judge for the following. We want you to declare this violates the intervening clause. This embraces more than one subject. We need to have them stopped from administering or moving forward with any of this and continue to retain jurisdiction over it. Otherwise, issue us an injunction. Great filing that was tremendously successful today. Thank you to Thomas McCarthy, Connor Woodfin, Michael Thomas, Gillespie Hart, and others submitting this to the judge. And the judge, as we saw, came down today and said, you win. And now this rigged gerrymander attempt by the Democrats loses, and we're not going to stay this pending appeal. Now, they'll, of course, appeal it aggressively. And, of course, the question is, how quickly can they move? Because we do have elections coming up, and the Supreme Court has already kicked it back down and said, oh, we'll let the vote go on. And, of course, we know how this works. The higher courts will say, we're not going to divest the people's will. We saw that in 2020. We're not going to overrule an election. So we'll see. This whole thing might go up to the Supreme Court of the United States. We'll see if it goes that far. But for now, big win on this. And the Democrats are not happy about it. They were all high and mighty celebrating this. The will of the people. The will of the people. Turns out, no, it's like 50.1% of the people. And they're running the election. So, how does it go when they're in charge? We've seen this story before. So who is this judge, American hero called Jack Hurley Jr.? Circuit Court judge for the 29th Judicial District. He was appointed by Governor Bob McDonnell back in 2012. Got his law degree from Richmond School of Law and was an attorney in private practice in the town of Tazewell. During an October 2025 special session, the Virginia GA approved an amendment illegally. To approve this, the measure needed to be approved twice, once before the general election of the House of Delegates, and then in a separate session after the election with identical text. They approved the amendment on 26 during its general. Republicans filed a legal challenge like the day after. Hurley found that the measure did not follow proper rules for placing the amendment on the ballot. and ruled that it could not appear on the ballot. Went up to the Supreme Court there in Virginia. They said, put it on the ballot. Voters voted, and they said, well, there might still be some, procedural problems with it, but the voters have voted barely to strip half their countrymen of any representation at all. They're sick people. They would do a lot worse than that if they could vote for it. Just think about what the Democrat polls were saying back during COVID. Like, they would take your kids away from you. They would lock you up. They would put you in jail. They would ban you from any travel. Like, you can't get on an airplane. You can't leave your home. You're locked down. These people are sick. So fortunately, tremendous victory, courtesy of an amazing judge called Judge Jack S. Hurley Jr. They're going to appeal it and put a lot of effort behind this, but we're going to keep our eye on this one, and any other memorandum or any other filings that drop on this, we'll be here to cover it. So their fleeting victory is for now paused, hopefully in perpetuity, because they don't play by the rules. They try to cheat every single chance they can, and this time they got stopped. So we'll keep our eye on this one. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do.
Okay, so that was the latest breaking news taking place. It is kind of shocking to actually see that this is what took place today. We just did a show earlier about how the Democrats won this election, and it was going to be some major changes. What a lot of people didn't know was what the actual proposed redistricting was. A lot of people don't know that they were redistricting it for 10-1 as opposed to the 6-5 that it currently is. And so that means a lot of the people who may have voted weren't even aware that they were voting out their representative for that particular spot that representative represented. So this is a major development. It seems like by the case that was actually filed, they had succinct points as to what the procedure should have been followed, and there was proof and evidence that procedure was not properly followed. So the judge saw that was a compelling case and awarded the plaintiff, which in this case is the RNC, pretty much what they wanted, for this to be immediately stopped and for it not to go into effect. So now that means a lot of the steps that the Democrats would have taken to start redistricting, to start doing new ballots and things of that nature, has to be halted. So we'll see where it goes. It's likely that this will be a drag-out fight, as I'm sure the Democrats are incentivized to get this victory. So it'll probably escalate to the state Supreme Court and potentially even to the Supreme Court of the land. And we'll see what happens next. But I thank you guys for joining me. I wanted to share this update with you guys. I know we just did a story on this earlier. It has major implications. So I wanted to definitely give you guys an update on this. So definitely stay connected to the show, like and subscribe below, and weigh in. Also, share your comments, share your thoughts. What do you think about this development? And just be well until we speak again. God bless.